Hello there everyone and welcome back. The Season 3 multiplayer continues and this time we're going to have ourselves a bit of a mirror match against Archivist, is it? I honestly can't remember off the top of my head, I just saw it so quickly it went past my mind, but nonetheless, this is going to be one of the more awkward type of matchups for me, simply because my pulsars are heavily mitigated by the holofields themselves, and since it's the only weapon I really have outside torpedoes, it's going to be tricky to do damage at least at range safely, so my main means of getting victory is just kind of trying to rely on maybe the hit point advantage I have with 5 cruisers, as opposed to maybe 4 ships with a Phoenix or 2, since I think I technically still have slightly more hit points that way, but at the same time, it's going to be a little bit awkward for me, especially with that said, because my opponent's actually going to be fielding 3 Phoenixes for this match, and I think I'll like Cruiser to accompany them. When I do realize the stealth type ship grabbing points, I figure all this time it was a frigate, but in this case it was actually a light cruiser complementing them. So there is possibility here in that my opponent is not utilizing torpedoes against me. It just comes down to how effectively I can aim with them and how much I can hit with them. And I do ultimately go with the polarized field to deal with the asteroid belts, although I've contemplated a little bit on being able to deal with possible morale problems once my flagship gets shot down, but ultimately I feel like the asteroid belt upgrade was probably a better choice in this regard, since I am going to be pushing aggressively towards their half the map and grab the objective that's behind the asteroid belt you see on the top right there. That is my playstyle, especially seeing that we're facing off against 3 Phoenixes, and with that also said, that justifies a little bit of why I decided to push that way, and this is where I kind of assumed maybe it was a frigate. I wasn't really thinking it was a light cruiser, since I suppose it was kind of the point difference there. Even though the Phoenixes were technically reduced in points, I didn't really figure they were actually able to afford a light cruiser. Since, yeah, a Phoenix would almost be a little bit under 400 points, or at least it originally was around 400 points, so that's probably where my mind was there, but it's not a big factor in this match. What's important is dealing with the Phoenixes, and of course the fact that we have a bunch of fighters and bombers, which are going to make this a really difficult prospect for me as this fight drags out. So my main priority through this first portion of the battle is just trying to deny the bombers, and I have a very convenient way to do that. I have the polarized field, of course, to hide my ships with the asteroid belt, and this objective is perfectly situated to just conceal myself. So it's very simple dealing with this, and ideally what I was kind of hoping the dream situation would be for me is to try and strike at the Phoenixes while their bombers and fighters are still on cooldown. So ideally, maybe I could do a lot of the torpedo runs I need and possibly cripple if not destroy one of the Phoenixes before those bombers come back online. And with good use of this asteroid field, since this is kind of how I'm situating myself so far, there is a lot of potential to be had with where I'm at now. The only awkward thing, the only sucky thing is, like I said, the pulsars are going to be very limited, and this is where I talk about trying to fixate on the frigate, or at least in this case the light cruiser a little bit, since I do burn the fighters as well. And I think that's going to cost me a little bit, maybe, since I don't recall if my fighters are back up on cooldown by the time we get our eventual engagement, but I do hear the rate bonus shift. There's the confirmation that we already know, or at least that I already knew, that they're Phoenixes. And as such, you already see I'm making my maneuver to try and conceal them as quickly as possible. And this gives me a nice little layout for at least forcing my opponent to try and come to me. Since I hinted at this before in my last video, I kind of want to try and get a good defensive position, ideally with 3 points, which a lot of the times can be easier said than done, especially in the losing match I had with Adeptus Mechanicus when they have 22,000 range to their lances and macro batteries. It's not nearly as convenient when they have a handful of frigates to also reveal me conveniently with their scanner pulses. But in this case, I feel like I got that benefit, especially when you consider that there is a -20 accuracy penalty for anyone that shoots in my asteroid belts. I just gotta somehow get all my ships in there, but as I said, I try and prepare for this best I can. I have the flagship kind of in the bottom and trying to get out of position. I can't remember why I put it down there. I think it's so it couldn't get focused. And I'm holding fire deliberately, trying to make sure these things ideally shoot at the proper ship, but no. there was a weird issue again where my fire got staggered a little bit and I didn't quite get the generator critical hit I was aiming for. But I forced the Wraithbone ship with the first torpedo. That's what happened there with that one dive in. And while sadly the second torpedo salvo did not work out well there, but with the Wraithbone shift and their false maneuver spent, these torpedoes do strike at least decently enough. They do have brace for impact mitigated though. So it is quick, it is brutal match nonetheless. And one thing to note as well, the 3 bomber squadrons also managed to hit the one ship they were targeting as we were engaging, which is probably where I'm having a lot of issues here than I would like, simply because again I was trying to avoid that damage, because I think that actually did like half my damage to one of my cruisers just right off the very beginning. And with these whiff torpedoes that I've been doing, and the misclick to my camera there, this is rapidly snowballing against me now. At least it feels like it anyway. Both their Phoenixes took notable damage. The light cruiser is about to die. This one just took a massive torpedo broadside, and I rammed the light cruiser for good measure. So yeah, with how close this match ultimately turned out, I feel like, I'm gonna do something a little bit different. We're gonna just rewind this a little bit, just back to the original engagement. Just give me a moment here. You're not gonna notice this awkward rewinding, as it were, but basically to the initial engagement itself, never mind the pulsars, which there is a little bit of a weird glitch. I tried to hold fire and tried to position them in a way that they would actually shoot at the center Phoenix. That's what I was originally aiming for when I was doing this maneuver. And hell, it's not really a terrible thing having my cruisers stagger as well, since Disruption Overcharge has like a 10-second pause to the hull field. Having my pulsars stagger in between when they're recharging helps with keeping their hull field down, especially if this fight were to drag out for whatever reason. But most importantly, this is what I'm curious about. How much damage did those bombers do? Since my flagship's in a terrible spot to actually intercept, and I think all 3 bombers with the ram attempt, we easily dealt one. Yeah, there goes like 2/3 of my health right there easily. A little bit was from the ram as well, so I feel like if I had played with the same mindset still and was diligent enough to have these in the asteroid belt, I feel like that would have been a win for me. Even with those whiff torpedoes, and just imagine if some of those torpedoes struck a little bit truer, a little bit better on my part. It would have been snowballed that much better in my favor, I feel like. But at the end of the day, not having those 2 cruisers in the asteroid belt, maybe they could have been my second wave, as I was hinting at before with staggering the pulsars. Maybe I could have done that. At least then they would have been far enough away to not get revealed by the detection radius. But it's still a loss. It's a quick and brutal one, and like I said, Asuryani mirror matches are going to be really awkward type of matchup for me. But at least in this individual case, I feel like I could have won that if I'd done things a little bit better. Okay, on to the second match, and we're going to have ourselves a rematch with Saracen, and interestingly enough, Saracen's not going to go with the Massive Claw type of fleet we saw before, but I'm going to leave a surprise to what he's utilizing, because it's probably not what you're going to expect. I don't think I should say anything more than that, in all honesty, since it is a different fleet, although it's still one that can potentially be very dangerous for me once you understand what it is to a limited extent. But I am, with me not realizing that after the fact, or before the fact rather, I go with the usual mindset here, the usual preparations, and this time around I get the convenience of potentially grabbing all 3 objectives well before Saracen can grab his, or at least get to the middle of the map. This is the one big benefit I have here, and only one convenient gas cloud, at least as Saracen advances towards me to kind of reconceal his ships, if I were to somehow luckily reveal them with like the beacon or fighters, scouts. So this position is a lot more in my advantage, I want to argue at least. Although at the same time, if we're dealing with Pyras, and I did hear the tracking senses, although it sounded like it was only 1 or 2 tracking senses, so I don't really use that as a tell that I'm facing off against Pyras just yet. And even though I'm kind of not telling you what the fleet is, you can kind of make assumptions that's not what it is either, but there is some real value to at least having a single ship with tracking senses, to some vague extent, since it allows you to reveal the ships earlier. Although the only benefit of that is if you can get in range to properly make use of that reveal detection, because with most of the weapons on outside the hive ships with the pyre assets shooting at only 9,000 range, having an extra detection range is not really helpful a lot of the times, I would argue, so that is kind of what I feel like that one little tracking senses tell that I got was, and we do see where hive ships are at least. We get a vague sense, we get a good idea, and I can't remember the speed or the one on the right, but I go with the assumption maybe that was a hive ship as well, at least a larger capital ship, since it was going incredibly fast, but not quite a hive ship, especially since we got to tell it captured slower than the first objective there. And we hear the Void Lurker, and conveniently enough, we see a Devourer. So, what this tells me is that Devourer is separated from the rest of the fleet. So this beacon placement, ideally just to reveal this gas cloud, is immense for me. It gives me, again, that denial of Saracen having the convenience of re-concealing himself if I were to randomly detect him, and the fighter squadron itself helps immensely in that regard. And we also had audible rushes, so maybe, just maybe, that was fixed in the last patch, because I am terrified of the notion of having to face off, as for some reason we still see a silhouette of the Devourer. I don't know what happened there. But I am terrified of the notion as I deal with this dang traffic jam that we have in the middle of space. Don't ask me how that's happened. It happened nonetheless though, and half my hull feels down as a result of that. One of the little nuances that can easily bite you in the ass, says Eldari. Now I lost my train of thought on that regard, but nonetheless, I haven't honestly looked at the ships just yet. I'm kind of going with the assumption it's power acid, but I honestly didn't give them a real good look, and what Saracen is utilizing is bioplasma. And they still have the 9,000 range, but one important thing to note with the bioplasma is they ignore my hollow field. And I conveniently false maneuver thinking that was an aggressive play. I was prepared for a potential rush maneuver on me, especially since that flagship is not as much of a liability as it was the last time I played off against Saracen, since last time, once I killed the flagship, he had nothing with the synaptic link, but in this case all the hive ships have access to it, and there's 3 of them we have to deal with. So I'm not going to be winning by breaking morale in this match, simply put. Although, it haven't really dawned on me the fact that there's actually no frigates here, which at least is a nice convenient, but prioritizing weapons, I still didn't realize it was probably bioplasma, but with the mindset that it was likely pyroacid or something to that effect, I did prioritize weapons, and already we destroyed at least one of the prow guns on the first hive ship, and I'm in good shape now. Did take a little bit of damage, but that's mostly just due to the convenience of being able to fight these while they're separate, arguably, as opposed to the extra range that a bioplasma, or not bioplasma, but was it? Oh, pyroacid. I don't know how the hell it took me so long to remember pyroacid, but it happened nonetheless. But torpedoes, bombers, did I actually fire torpedoes? No, I don't even think I fired torpedo salve at all. It was just the bombers with the shields down that complimented me here. And while the pulsars may have made that an easy kill for me with the disruption overcharge, I really do hope they fix that. Good God, look at all these waypoints. I probably am worried now, after seeing this, just how much I click randomly, because if you were to lay that down throughout the entire match, I'm sure the entire map would be filled by all these damn waypoint arrows, because we're just seeing a hint of that right now, aren't we? Good God. I think I'm even admiring it just a little bit, or in total shock just from playing the match itself, looking at it briefly there. But I'm in good shape. I did have to forfeit my positional advantage, so Saracen does have 4 objectives, and that's going to quickly, very rapidly negate the bonus I have for killing off one of his ships. So I am contemplating whether I should get aggressive and try and kill his fleet now, or try and grab the 3 points on top there and just play a more slower casual game. But with the convenience of revealing this one hive ship and how far forward it is compared to the rest, I am contemplating just going in for the kill, because I believe that the fighters are going to stay alive long enough for me to at least do the damage necessary. At least with the pulsars, and then afterwards I can conveniently go in for a torpedo run once my fighters are recalled or at least destroyed, which they're about to intercept the other fighters. So I don't think they're long for this world at this point, but the beacon at least ensures that the Shroud effect does not take effect on the second hive ship, so I'm very confident in getting this kill here. We're just facing off in a very awkward predicament as I lob every single torpedo. Taking 2 on the side, I figured I was a clear or wouldn't have turned fast enough, but the results speak for itself there. Now we just have to deal with very angry Devourer that did get its board in, which I believe is actually enough to kill the first third of my crew, but with very little damage in every other regard, I think I'm still okay. I just have no torpedoes to really finish off this one Devourer, and this hive ship is still going to take a while to kill, even with all those fire assaults on it. But Saracen decides to concede nonetheless, since we were very close to at least killing off at least the third ship there, since there actually was, interestingly, no frigates at all, but that's in all honesty due to the fact that Saracen decided on Devourer as opposed to the traditional 3 hive ships and a bunch of frigates to fill in. So that was a nice simple match comparison to the last one. Okay, we have ourselves another match with Drukhari, and after the first 2 matches you think I'm starting to feel a little bit comfortable and a little confident in this type of matchup, but there's always that risk, especially with battleships and the fact that I can grab objectives really damn quickly in comparison to my cruisers, because even then, if I were to spread out my fleet and try to play for an objective game for whatever reason, as kind of an example with the Impaler, how my opponent, a Border Prince played in the second match, is 3 cruisers still are capturing objectives slower than a battleship, and with my opponent in this match as well, going with the 3 battleship type of strategy, they can easily just grab points better than me. So I'm going to be relegated a little bit to try to catch them off guard, or at least try and reveal them and pinpoint where they are, which is ultimately going to be a lot that I feel like is how Drukhari should play, since, again, I said before, they should not be able to beat me in a straight up fight just because of the convenience of the whole field alone. Allow me to negate a lot of their damage, and of course, if they're using Impalers, then they don't really have the raw firepower to just kill me anyway, due to the fact that half their weaponry is utilized for boarding as opposed to damage itself. Whereas bombers, of course, could theoretically do some really good damage if they can get to the ships. But we're seeing pretty much the same here. I honestly can't remember what the loadout was. It was not Impalers, and I'm almost certain it was not torpedoes, so I want to say the battleships were Shadow Lances. I honestly can't remember because I don't recall having to dodge torpedoes in this matchup, if I were to be seriously honest. And we are right off the bat seeing 6 ships too, so 3 of which are frigates over here, we can tell. And I'm contemplating, yeah, these are the 3 battleships here, so maybe they're Shadow Lances? Well, who am I kidding? Most Drukhari's fleets are able to utilize a light cruiser as well with these 3 battleships, so maybe that's where my headspace is at. I'm trying to dissect what the fleet is at the same time, since I honestly can't remember. Since my opponent's going to be playing a very objective-centric type of match once I start putting pressure on them, it seems like, or at least start pinning down where one of their battleships are, since we saw where 3 of them were without out, one of which, well, 2 of them already grabbed objectives, and I'm making a play to at least put pressure on where the one in the middle is at. I have fighters to at least give me a little bit of early warning, and maybe a bit of protection on the flanks, but already the Drukhari is grabbing the point on the left there. And we are getting some shots, and I thought it was a battleship, but no, it's the 3 frigates, which we kind of already knew from when I checked them earlier. And they are the really cheap ones at that, which is kind of where my opponent was able to afford 3 of these frigates, I think. Because they are still pretty damn expensive with how fragile they are. And they are actually Shadow Lances, okay. I was wondering about that, if I were to be perfectly honest. Sadly, I do not have the convenience of a stasis bomb like I did with a Border Prince, trying to use that as a way to counteract a Wraith Bone shift away from me, since I do technically still have more speed than them. Although sadly, my opponent has completely eluded me, and with the shadow field it makes it really difficult for me to try and hunt them down. Since even if I did have a Wraith Bone shift, that shadow field will slow down the movement of even my boost. Which is where I think Drukhari can still fight against Asuryani pretty decently, at least short term, since that shadow field alone allows them to get away from me, as I find and pick off the second one, which is mostly due to a little slight lapse of control there, since the shadow field did fall down, but I do have Disruption Overcharge to help in this regard a lot, at least to keep it from concealing itself once I do detect it. And the beacon does reveal the battleship, but I'm in no position to actually take advantage of it, or at least punish that. All I realistically can do, as I clean up the last of these 3 ships in spectacular fashion by ramming it, no less. Yeah, I use it as basically a gauge on where the other battleships potentially are. At least that way, making me more comfortable when I start roaming and hunting down this one battleship, because I know it's in the area. I've been listening for Wraithbone ships, which is the only real tell I can actually get of if I'm going the right direction or where they're vaguely at. And when they do get shots on me, I am able to at least start pinpointing them. But honestly, as Drukhari, you never want to kind of have me facing towards you when you start shooting, because ideally, if I'm going to chase you, I think you want me to burn the falls maneuver as well as the Wraithbone shift to do a quick pursuit. Since then, like a maneuver like this, if I had burnt my cooldowns, this thing could freely just shoot at me for as long as it's able to, especially with a longer range, since this is conveniently also the flagship at the same time. And it's wedged into a corner as well, and with the beacon about to come up, fighters are also available. This thing is all but screwed just because of that reveal right now. It is starting to do notable damage there, but I have been lucky with the disruption bombs in that they have not been able to punish the disruption bombs when they actually hit my cruisers. Which I feel like if they had waited until that happens, they could easily get maybe 200, maybe 300 points of damage on me, and if they were to get a generator critical hit, let alone a permanent one, then that cruiser's potential easy pickings if they can continue this game. But due to the inconvenience of having the beacon come up, or at least the recharge on the beacon, or at least the cooldown on the beacon, I don't know what I'm trying to say, coming back up at the perfect timing when a battleship was kind of wedged in the corner, kind of meant certain doom for that poor battleship. It was just a little bit inconvenient timing there, at least for them, since they had really nowhere else to go. Unless they were able to conveniently dodge the fighters, that might have been the only way they could have eluded me, since this beacon single-handedly just covers the southern path really damn well. And with boarding potential negated, and resupplying my flagship, because I kind of wanted to avoid losing that first third of my crew to, well, to be honest, I did burn the cold arms, which is technically no different than the emergency repair in a lot of situations, but I guess this is where my opponent sort of is kind of conceding defeat, but like I said before, they're going to avoid me entirely from here on out. And even though I destroyed one of their battleships, just take a look at the score right now. I am not faulting my opponent at all for playing this type of cat and mouse game, because in all honesty, that is their greatest strength in this type of matchup. And hell, if you've seen me playing around with the Evil Sun's, was it Orc Mega Can type of fleet, you've seen me play multiple matches against Drukhari where I have to play an objective-based game, since it's almost impossible as the Orc player to try and pin down and hunt down the Drukhari. So I've basically been playing the same type of strategy as them, so I don't fault my opponent at all. I think they may be thinking that playing an objective-based game is kind of a poor habit, or was it bad mannerism, I guess? But it's 12 different factions, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, if I were to be serious. And the fact that even in my Orc games, I want to say that I kind of proven that that is a winning strategy for Orcs. I don't know if it's like the only way you can win as Orcs against Drukhari, mind you, at least as Evil Sons. It could be a lot of fun with the Blood Axes with the Commandos and Shroud effect to kind of screw over your Drukhari adversary quite well, especially if they fly conveniently into your Mega Cannons, but that's not the point of this battle. It's like I said, my opponent's going for an objective-based game and I didn't even realize that the battleship was behind me there until after I grabbed the second point, so I was really damn slow to turn around. But normally, this would be a big mistake, potentially, at least in favor of Drukhari, as I mess up the capture of this objective, but since I took down a third of the real firepower, never mind the frigates that we also sniped, I am comfortable going in squads of 2, since again, if I can keep my hull field charged and I'm conveniently able to spot them, then I can do a great deal of damage to them, so long as I can reveal them. That's the big trick. And even then, with Disruption Overcharge bringing down their shadow fields, at least to allow me to keep constant vision so long as I can keep hitting them, I just need to spot them and hit them with at least one of my ships, and that Wraithbone shift is a really nice tell that there's something nearby. You can even see it with me reacting right away, just taking a turn, taking evasive maneuvers to try and hunt it down, at least try and narrow and restrict where it can go. And there. We get to tell where the second ship is. I'm actually conveniently about to reveal it, which they didn't boost away, so I'm wondering if this was the... Okay, take that back. I was gonna say maybe this was the ship that tried boosting away earlier that I chased down. Nope. We got the convenience of hitting this with Disruption Overcharge. Oh, actually, I don't think it... Huh. Did Disruption Overcharge not do anything? I'm pretty certain I hit it. But nonetheless, Falls Maneuver spent, Wraithbone ships burnt, so you know what that means. This is a perfect opportunity to... Huh. I'm just noticing my Disruption Overcharge didn't work against the Shadow Field, oddly enough. It's probably keeping it from recharging, it goes without saying, but... Is this another bug I'm not aware of? Because, yeah, it's not charging now, but... I figured it would bring the field down. So this is another bug that I have to keep in mind. We found the Surge battleship conveniently trying to flank me, but this is goes a lot to what I was saying about making sure that either disruption bombs are kind of active to maximize that damage, or at least waiting until my falls maneuver is available. Because realistically, the only way these battleships can avoid me is with the dark matter cannon, which greatly reduces, even if it's only a 25% slow, of me pursuing them with the Wraithbone shift. So they can elude me, at least in the short term, if they want to try for damage. But I don't fault my opponent at all for playing objective-based games, since again, what was the score exactly? They were actually ahead of me by about 400 points before actually hunting down, or at least getting in combat with these two battleships, so they could have still technically won this. It would just be a matter of how well I could deny them, grabbing points behind me, in my back door no less, when I finally push forward to grab these objectives. So I think, really, this is still not a terrible matchup for Drukhari, just not one they can win straight up. Although, I would have to play a lot more as Drukhari to say that with certainty, to be perfectly honest. Okay, on to the fourth match, and we're face off against Liberal, which I am used to face off against when he was Adeptus Mechanicus, or when they were Adeptus Mechanicus anyway, so I honestly have no idea what to expect here going into this match, since I normally have to deal with a lot of Novacans, and of course 5 cruisers, and a lot of the times with Liberal like to forfeit a lot of fission there. So, on some occasions not having any frigates at all, so I just don't know what to honestly expect with this said, since it's a different change of pace with that said. And I do again contemplate whether I should go with the Shrine of Asuryani to kind of help mitigate the potential damage of the Kulex's Assassin, even though Disruption Overcharge is not a thing here. I just have yet to get a feel for how much I can get away with, especially for a matchup like Imperial Navy with that said. So I do truly contemplate it and stick with it ultimately. But with that said, I am starting to like the potential to some extent with the Asteroid Belt field, but since Asuryani, or at least Eldari in general, are really damn good at dodging macro cannons, especially at long range, since we're going to be likely face off against long range type of weaponry, and right off the bat we see an Oberon here. So we're going to get to see firsthand the potential of the scanner pulse for this ability, and I thought it was only 4 ships at first, but it's actually going to be what, 4 Overlords paired up with the Oberon. And like I said before, having battleships there trying to go after them can be a bit of a liability, since they have a lot of shield help for me to get through, and you can see me changing my stances once I realized they're cruisers as opposed to battleships, since I thought maybe I was going up against maybe 4 ships as opposed to 5 cruisers, or at least 5 capital ships rather. But right off the bat, I try and grab 3 points I can as safely as I can, and with the tell that the frigate was boosting out, I am launching these fighters with the sole intention of sniping this frigate ASAP. Since that's what that's the entire point of why I launched those fighters when I did, if I were to be so honest. I saw it boost, I saw where it was going, and now I'm going to take full damn well advantage of it. So much so that I'm actually going to boost towards it at the same time too. So, try as it might, it's not going to get away. I'm going to tell you right now, this thing immediately dies. So, there's Liberal's first mistake. Revealing that frigate to me to make for easy pickings. And a good thing too, because that can be quite a nuisance as I try and take full advantage of this gas cloud. My positioning is kind of decent so far, but I didn't quite get the convenience of grabbing that 3rd point, since my forward momentum was blunted with being revealed. But with the lances and all that, and I do try, well, I don't think I actually do now, but you're going to see me doing a lot of zigzag movements to try and mitigate these Overlords as macro cannons, and that's what we're up against. We're face off against 4 Overlords, trying to hide behind the Oberon to the best of their ability. And this is where you're going to see the zigzagging motion. I don't know honestly how effective it is, but the idea is to just completely dodge these macro cannons, and just ultimately means I have to just deal with the lance fire. And thankfully my hull feels pretty decent at dealing with that, as I slowly but steadily try and poke on through. Although the fact I'm trying to focus down the Oberon may be a bit of a mistake because of what I was saying before, but right now it's kind of the most convenient target for me to go after at the same time, since all the battleships are kind of hiding behind it really damn well. So shields go down, and sadly, this is where the supercharged void shield is kind of completely pointless, isn't it? Since Liberal did have the supercharged void shield, which could have blunted its attack amazingly, but they tried to use it to recharge the shield, and that I do feel bad for them there, because they could have easily blunted that attack with the supercharged void shield if they just use it to soak the damage, which in all honesty, when you're face off against pulsars that are not staggered, I honestly would argue that it's better value to have it soak the damage, give you the immunity, as opposed to recharging your shields, since I think you're blocking more damage that way than you're actually recharging. But I did get a lucky break on destroying the generator as well. I don't know how lucky that was in all honesty, but again, we were dealing with a battleship, and with the problems I had, never mind these torpedoes that I switched to brace for impact for, I have been a bit of a burden when I face off against 3 of those Arc Mechanicus after all. And I'm just containing myself to just reconceal myself, since at this point I feel like, with no other scanner pulses, no other indication of another frigate, I'm just going to reconceal myself, but without the polarized field I am taking a little bit of damage here. I don't know how drastic and painful it is, and never mind the fact how awkward it is right now trying to maneuver in this field too to reconceal myself, but like before, like all the other matchups, I'm kind of forced to forfeit my objective and just relegate myself to at least the early point lead I have so far. And I am not quite familiar with what to expect with the Oberon, so I kind of revert to a vague extent Battlefleet Gothic Armada 1 kind of mindset with the Emperor and the Widowmaker, where they had a ridiculous amount of sensor range, especially if you got like the upgrade for them to enhance their range further. So I probably play a little bit too passively to my liking, and Liberal is just going to hang in the gas cloud. So what I'm ultimately going to do is, I do split up the fleet. I'm going to be trying something a little bit that you're not used to seeing, at least in my matches so far, and I'm going to try and spread these out and sandwich them and look for an opportunity to at least pick off the Oberon. Since the generators are permanently gone, I at least have the benefit of just getting any shot to hit it or connect with it to be permanent, as opposed to having to get through the sheer health pool of the shields itself. But I am grabbing points. I am going to start falling behind over time, especially now that I currently have, well, I just got the second objective, but for a good while I only had 1 point to really take advantage of, and I'm going to circle around, try and prepare to steal this 3rd point as well. Force them out of their comfort zone, and ideally, of course, force a response out of my opponent. I'm still technically going to be in range of their lances, but this is where a little bit of my inexperience with the enhanced sensor range is going to be making me play a little bit passive. Sure, I don't realistically expect to do a lot of damage while they're in the gas cloud without utilizing or potentially sacrificing my fighters, but there is still a lot of opportunity for me to grab the point on the far left once I circle around. And this is what, a second charge in a melted torpedoes. I do try and turn around and evade, but the idea I think here is just to stall me out, keep me from grabbing the objective sooner. But this is why I like spraying out the Eldari fleet a bit, because it gives me an open window to potentially get behind them. Sure, I'm not going to realistically get to do a lot of damage that I want, but at the same time, if they're not facing towards me, or at least not in a position to do damage to me, let alone charge me, I should be able to theoretically grab that 3rd point with very little risk, or at least very little damage. And I apologize for that noise, whatever that was in the background. I think that was my phone there, which I thought would not make any racket, dang it. Otherwise, I used the fighters to try and deny vision. That's what the fighter squadron was strictly for, because I'm fairly certain I'm at least in range. Definitely got a good breathing room to not get detected at the moment, since the Oberon only has what, 1,300, 13,000 sensor range, and what you're seeing right now is just 9,000 range on my cruisers. So we can very easily kind of gauge where I would get detected if I were to try and get a little more bolder. But otherwise, the very weird thing happens there, although I may have overlooked it already, is that my fighters were at risk of dying or getting destroyed, so you saw me for a brief period going into the asteroid belt trying to minimize or at least have the fail-safe in case my fighters will actually get destroyed, which thankfully they did not, but for a brief period there I was actually concerned they were going to get shot down and the fighters would reveal me. And inconveniently, even though I knew I was going to take shots, immediately my generator gets pulverized, gets obliterated from that lucky shot, permanently destroyed. Light damage I could have dealt with, but this makes it really awkward for me all of a sudden, because now, as opposed to the 75% chance to absorb their shots, I am now taking all of it if they ever focus down the ship. But we're in a sandwich position here. It's a bit awkward. It doesn't seem very effective to try and deal with the cruisers, but at the same time it gives me a window to grab this objective safely since he's not flying towards me. Liberal is not coming towards me, so... And when they do, I immediately turn around and at least try and grab another point behind them. Sadly, I mess up a tiny bit and just do not secure the capture on the objective, so that's a really big inconvenience for me there. But like I said, they boost towards me. It may not have ultimately mattered with all those overlords and their 3-time... Yeah, they captured the objective at 3 times speed as opposed to 2 times speed of my cruisers, and good god. I think my sword's starting to break. This is inconvenient timing and really damn embarrassing. But otherwise, I am grabbing a third point here. I still have the point lead, so this is not a terrible predicament for me, and at the same time I know where the Oberon is. I just gotta conceal myself in a gas cloud to minimize the damage on the overlords until I'm ready to strike. Just really difficult to do, and yeah, I thought it was in the gas cloud all this time, which is where my heading was, but you can see another glitch out right there where, inconveniently, I was not seeing it on the overlay or the UI itself or on the main screen. But we're in a prime position now to kill as Maelstrom now recharges. It has no high energy turns, so it's kind of forced to take these hits. Although using my Wraith Bone shift is a bit awkward, but it's about to come back up. I had my reload stance available. It's just a matter if I can do the damage necessary. And at least avoid the damage necessary, since I'm not afraid of this disruption bomb. One of the cruisers even lost its generator, and damn it, there's another miscontrol on my ships again, which could have very easily cost me one of those cruisers, but Oberon is very damn close to death and it suffers a second fire assault, I believe. No, it just dies immediately, never mind that fact. But with the another generator down and repairs kind of inconveniently out of operations, it's starting to fumble a tiny bit here, because I think boosting forward as carelessly as I did, especially since it probably didn't really matter, since the Oberon was stuck in the Maelstrom and my flagship was ready to intercept it. So, a minor mistake on my part nonetheless, because I could have gotten out of this a little bit better. Since right now, my generator is permanently gone, I'm trying to at least ideally cripple the engines of one of these ships and look for an opportunity for maybe a torpedo run. But even then, I try my best to get what little additional damage I can in though, as it gets this one final bit of glory with the ram attempt and potentially torpedoes, which sadly do not get the hit as well because of the constant boosting, so I missed out a tiny bit there. I could have aimed that a little bit better as far as maximizing damage, because if I were to get any critical hits, at least then, that would be vulnerable to maybe to be isolated, especially if I were to get the engine critical hit. Sure, destroying the generators may be better for trying to do permanent damage, but with the aggressive movements that Liberal has been doing, imagine what is falling behind if I were to get the engine critical hit. It's technically one less ship out of the fight, and if I were to circle around my opponent enough, then it opens up the possibility for me to harass it and maybe kill it off, especially if it's so far away, or at least how far away it was from the gas cloud that Liberal was trying to utilize up to this point. But otherwise, things are starting to fall apart and I'm trying to get more aggressive, which ultimately may be a bit of a mistake since I'm doing really damn well dodging the macro cannons. I think a lot of this, my mindset, has to do with the fact on how I immediately lost the generator on that one point that I grabbed earlier on, and that may have made me a little bit paranoid to suffering that same result again, because right now all my ships are still in really damn good condition, especially with how quickly we can do damage to their ships in return. And this is a good window for me to isolate them and maybe start crippling the engines. Since we have the Overlord finally isolated, I do have ships in a position to maybe start grabbing, although I was a little bit worried maybe the wreckage. Yeah, the wreckage did get in the way a little bit. 2 of my shots were foiled some. It's a little bit inconvenient there now to maneuver, especially with me Wraithbone shifting so aggressively as is. It is going to start biting me in the ass some unless I get a lucky engine critical hit. Maybe I could have Wraithbone shift here some to try and get some damage, but no. Wasn't meant to be. I'm not getting the torpedo hits I would have liked either, so that's a little bit unfortunate, especially since I wouldn't have done a lot of damage on the prow either. But I finally get an engine critical hit and the Maelstrom is going to do a world of damage to this thing, but right now I'm probably getting a little too close for comfort, especially with the, the summary execution, making this a little bit difficult for me trying to get away as well. Let's keep that in mind. That's going to cause a lot of problems, as I am just realizing I flew right into a Maelstrom as well, which is a bit problematic. And I didn't have torpedoes up, otherwise I probably would have done a false maneuver and just torpedo broadside that one cruiser there. So there was possibilities to do some real damage in this regard. But as it stands now, I'm not getting the torpedo hits I would have wanted. I'm doing a bad job aiming those, and those could have changed the tail of the story really damn well too for me. And that ship could have boosted out. It had the Wraithbone ship available. I wasn't fast enough on that draw too. Since right now, I was talking about, what, just 2 minutes ago, how it seemed like I was still in very much fighting shape. The points are getting really damn close towards it being a defeat, but at the same time, a lot of that is because of losing my ships there. I lost the second cruiser, which I would have been in the lead otherwise if I had not lost the second cruiser, and just losing the third one kind of cements this loss for me. And I'm getting a little bit tunnel vision on the crippled ship there, especially with this one such a prime target as well. Although I do hold fire, I try and aim towards this one ship and aim for the engine critical hit ideally. We do get a deck hit, not quite a kill just yet, and with 3 fire results I almost wanted to try and kill this thing off. And with, yeah, actually Liberal did get the repair. I thought it was a little bit later that the repair was actually activated, but no. It barely survives, or at least it still survives with a good amount of health left, so like I said, maybe I should have continued to play this game a little bit slower, since I was in good shape until I started getting hit by these torpedoes, and the light bit of ramming that I did take. But otherwise, it was still a good match. I am just kicking myself a little bit, because I did put myself in a bit of an awkward predicament, but I think it's a really good position nonetheless when I get it figured out. So we're just going to rewind a little bit to where I think I was in my strongest position, which is before I sniped the Oberon, where, give me a moment here, I'm just going to cut this back just a tiny bit, if I can find that. Okay, I think I found the time period I'm most interested in trying to master and figure out the most. Sure, going after Oberon was a big mistake, arguably, but that is one of the downsides to what deathballing and having all my cruisers all together ultimately does against me. At least it hurts me more than helps, since Liberal did have the supercharged voice shield to blunt my aggression, at least in a brute force type of way, so that's where I would have to stagger my ships if I want to realistically at least minimize how much the supercharged voice shield would mitigate. But in this situation, this screenshot here I just frame capped, or was it? I just paused the video, is basically what is on my end, where I have 3 cruisers on one side, 2 on the opposite side, and we know there's a crippled Oberon that's really easy pickings, and any kind of permanent damage I do to it is sure to cause problems. Although, again, the real threat in this engagement is of course the Overlords, just because the ramming potential and the torpedoes alone did a world of hurt to me, but I am really interested in getting put in this position more where I have 2 fleets on opposite sides, because keep in mind, I did incredibly well dodging the macro cannons. When facing Eldari, as counterintuitive as it sounds, your best weapon for doing damage a lot of the times is lances, and here's the simple truth that I need to kind of figure out and get used to. Those 4 Overlords with their 8 turrets do less damage than 2 of my cruisers combined. Hell, I even want to argue that one of my cruisers just straight up does more pulsar or lance damage than all the Overlord's lances combined. It's just the awkwardness of having to get through the shields that can be a bit of a problem, but This is why I want to experiment with it more, because in all honesty, these lances are not too terrifying on their own. So long as I can avoid the macro cannons to the best of my ability, and ideally avoid those, hull field, those generator critical hits that did kind of make me a little bit hesitant and did probably affect my mindset more than I realized in that matchup there, because technically one of my ships are effectively out of the match and probably could just be relegated, or at least forced to grab objectives and play more passively. But up until I got aggressive, I want to say I want to argue that was a very good position for me. It's just having a difficult time getting the engagements I want, and of course, all the errors I made was trying to Wraith Boat shift forward to try and get that damage in, just because they were just a tiny bit of distance away from my pulsars connecting. So hopefully I can correct mistakes like this overall, but I want to say up until we sniped Oberon, I think everything was going pretty damn well for me, I want to argue.